Welcome back. In this video, we are going to implement the functionality that allows us to click on one of those elements here of our list. And that is something that can be done in multiple different ways, but I'm just going to show you one way, which is the best practice way. So let's get started. In order to do that, what we need is, first of all, of course, the activity that we want to go to. And the activity that we want to go to is our happy place detail activity. All right, so once we want to go on that one, we of course want to also implement that activity. So we need to prepare that. And therefore, we have this activity happy place detail XML, in which we currently only have the toolbar. So let's style that a little bit. And what I want to have in there is a scroll view, which contains an image view and two text views underneath it. All right, so in order to implement that, you can of course go ahead and build everything from scratch, or you can just copy the code from the project that you can download. So the idea behind that is that we don't want to go through every single part of it again. We're going to require dimensions here. So let me paste them into my values as well. So here, dimensions. I'm going to need quite some of them. So let me put them in here as well. So we need a detail screen image height size. So how big should the image size be? Then detail screen description margin. So how much space do I want to have between the description and the other text? And then the location as well. So description text size, location text size. We have a little margin between the location and the description. And that's pretty much it. All right, so these are the dimensions. And then I also need a new color, and I'm just going to call this one detail screen description text color. So let me go to my colors here and add that in there, which is pretty much the same as circular image border color. So what we could do, of course, is put them together into one color and then reuse it. But in this way, we have more flexibility in terms of changing the colors. All right, so what is it that I have currently built right there? So let me show you the detail activity. So that's how it's gonna look. We have a little image here at the top, then we have the description and the location. All right, and then I apparently still have an error here. So I also need, of course, the image placeholder. So let's copy that image also into the project. So copy it in the project that you can download and paste it in here. So it's called detail screen image placeholder. So it's going to be this placeholder that you see a lot when using apps, right? Okay, so that is going to be the activity that we want to go to. And of course, later on, we will populate that activity with the correct image and the correct text and everything. But for now, we just need to implement the functionality which allows us to move from one screen to another by clicking onto one of the list view elements or recycler view elements. And this is a 5-step process. So first of all, we need to create an interface within our adapter. So let's go to our adapter here and let's create an interface inside of that adapter. So interface, I'm going to call this one OnClickListener. And in here, I will have an onClick function, which has a position of type int. And then the model that I want to pass, which will be of type happy place model. All right, and of course we can put the interface to the very bottom next to the class view holder here. So it's all clean and tidy. Okay, so that's step number 1. Step number 2 is to create a variable up top here and actually inside of the class, which will be our private var OnClickListener, which will be of type OnClickListener. And it's going to be a nullable, so I'm going to assign null to it right now. The next one is that we need to have a function which binds the OnClickListener. So fun set OnClickListener, which requires an OnClickListener. So OnClickListener, it's none of those actually. So let's type it, click listener, OnClickListener. So it requires an OnClickListener that we need to pass in. And then in there, we can go ahead and set that. So here we said this OnClickListener is going to be our OnClickListener that is passed to us. Why do we even need to do all of that? Well, because an adapter cannot have an OnClickListener as such. So we cannot add OnClickListener here. You know, like on. That's why we need to have this little workaround. Okay. And it's not really a workaround, it's really best practice, as I said, but still, it's a little more work than just adding an OnClickListener, because the actual OnClickListener that we want to have will be inside of our main activity, because that's where we use this adapter, right? We use this happy place adapter in our main activity, because here we have our RecyclerView. Okay, so what we need to do is we need to set up this inside of our setup happy place RecyclerView, because in there we create the adapter, and that's exactly where we can then go ahead and use that adapter. So we created this places adapter, and here we can say places adapter dot set OnClickListener, and here we pass in an object, a new object of happy places adapter dot OnClickListener. And now we can implement whatever we want to do with it, which means here I want to override the onClick function which we just created ourselves. Okay, so we created this onClick in our adapter, and that was down here, so inside of our interface. So you can see we created this onClick in the interface, and now we are using it. We are overriding it. We need to override it in our main activity. So here we need to go ahead and implement whatever we want to run. So what I want to run is I want to start a new intent. So val intent is going to be intent. I need to pass in the context, which is the main activity. And then I need to tell it where I want to go. So I want to go to happy places or place detail activity class.java. Okay, so I basically just move over to this other activity with this intent. And then of course I need to start this activity by using this intent here that we just created. All right, and then there is one last step that is left, and that is in our happy place adapter. We need to assign that OnClickListener to every single one of the different rows that we have, because this here is an entry in our RecyclerView, and we can assign an OnClickListener to it by going to our onBind view holder, because here we are binding every single view holder, which means a view holder is pretty much just this view that we have there, so which is just this list element here. And we assign to every single one of them. As you can see, we assign the image, we assign the title, we assign the description, and now we need to do the same thing with our OnClickListener. So we can just assign an OnClickListener here. So you can just go ahead and say holder dot item view dot set OnClickListener. So to the item view, so to its view itself, we are assigning this OnClickListener, in which we now can go ahead and implement our own code. So I'm just going to check if our OnClickListener is not null. Then I want to run the OnClickListener dot onClick with the position and our model. So what does that mean? Well, I'm passing which position was clicked, which means which element of the RecyclerView was clicked. So was it the first element, the second, the third, and so forth? Because we need to know that in order to display the correct information on the detail view later on. And then I'm passing in the model, which is basically our happy place model. Okay, so this one here, happy place model, where we know everything. We pass in the whole thing, everything, the title, the image, the ID, description, and so forth. And then we can use that model in order to populate the activity later on and display all of the relevant information, because that's basically what we wanted in the start anyways, right? But first of all, we needed to get there. So we needed to move over to the screen. So let's go back to the adapter, because now you can see we are setting the OnClickListener. So once we click on it, we will move over to the other activity. So you can see we call this OnClick, which basically is going to call this OnClick because we are overwriting it here. We're passing in the position and the model. Where do we get it from? Well, from the view that we clicked on, and then we start the intent, or start the activity intent here, which will then send us over to the details view. So let's test that. So let's go, let's click on one of them, and you can see we get over to the next screen, which we of course haven't implemented anything in it yet. So it's just this image that we have and two empty texts which we never populated. So that's something that we still need to do, of course, but overall you can see this is the procedure that you need to follow in order to implement OnClick to your individual list items. And that is of course just one way, but it's the best way to do that. All right, so if you want to do it, just follow this simple sequence. So let's go over it again. What do we need to do to get there? Well, we need to go to our adapter and then implement a new interface, or create a new interface. OnClickListener, and then create a function called OnClick in there, which you pass in the position and then some other information that you want to have. For example, the model. Then you need to add a variable to that OnClickListener here at the very start of your class. It doesn't have to be there, but it makes sense to the start of the class. Okay, and it can be a nullable at that point because we are going to bind that later on. So you need to create this function here, set OnClickListener, where you actually bind the OnClickListener to this OnClickListener. So the one that you are passing when calling this function. That is important. All right, and then you need to actually pass the OnClickListener to this function when calling it from the activity in which you have the RecyclerView. Okay, so in our case, it's the main activity. There we have our RecyclerView, which also of course has the adapter. So we create an object of the adapter, which is our happy place adapter, in which we created this OnClick function and the whole interface thing. So we set the OnClickListener, or we call this function which we just created, this OnClickListener function, then create a new happy places OnClickListener, which is our interface, and we override its OnClick. Okay, so we override its OnClick function, and there we do whatever we want to do once somebody clicks on it. It doesn't have to be an intent where you go to another screen. In this example, we want to do that, but it doesn't necessarily have to be. Okay, and then you of course need to bind that. So that's the final step. You need to bind it to the individual view holder. So you go to bind view holder, so on bind view holder to this function, and then you assign it this OnClickListener to the holder's item view. And if it exists, then you call the OnClick function. And here at this point, you of course have the position and model, in our case the model, but it's not necessarily just going to be the model. You can have whatever structure you want to have for OnClick, but in our case, we want to pass in the position and the model. All right, so this is going to be necessary quite often. So pretty much every time that you want to be able to click on list elements. So make sure that you can reproduce that. And yeah, I'd say let's go to the next video.